Hey, welcome back to MobilityWOD. This is the movement prep and movement mechanical cues for WOD 12.2 in the CrossFit Games Open. Big snatch ladder. You saw two big guys go for it. We're going to talk about efficiency and some of the kind of less obvious pieces. If we break down the movements, there's really a couple things that we need to be thinking about. Overhead positioning, we're getting pretty good at prepping for that. I'll give you a couple cues on that when we're done with this. But the less sneaky piece, or the less obvious piece, is the internal rotation piece. Now what's going to happen is that athletes are going to get into this workout and they're strong enough early enough, but they're going to start snatching, and it's high rep snatch. Shoulders are going to be forward. And what happens is, as from a top-down setup, which is probably how I'm going to easily approach this, is that if my shoulders are forward, or if I'm missing internal rotation, it's going to slow my turnover down, and it's going to make my receiving position a difficult lockout. So as a less obvious movement prep piece, we're going to think about working on internal rotation so that I can keep my shoulders squarely back and tucked away, so it becomes easy to power snatch or receive this in a muscle snatch overhead position. Now, so we're keeping those in mind. Now here's the big two ideas. I really think this is the heart of being efficient here, is that when we get tired, what's going to happen is that the hip, we're going to leave the hip high, and we're going to end up doing a very much of a good morning position. The key to being able to keep the butt down and torso upright is to be able to shove the knees out. The more we can shove the knees out in that bottom setup position, the more we're going to be able to keep the torso upright, put the load in the hip, and off the erectors in the back, because what's going to get smoked is having to pull and keep throwing this thing back. So what we're going to be thinking about on our setup particularly is, can I keep my torso upright? Now, the first one is the first movement, but since this is probably a touch and go iteration, this is really what we're going to focus on, is what I call torque farming. So at the top of the motion, when I lock out, I've got my armpits forward, I'm in a good position, I need to be able to cultivate torque on the way down, reclaiming position and reclaiming tension as I load for my next rep. The place that's going to make a lot of mistakes for people is that they're going to come down and they're going to lose all of that beautiful torque, and they're going to end up in the bottom in a pretty soft position. Back's going to round, shoulders are going to be soft, and then I've got to turn that around through all that soft tissue. So what we're going to look at instead is, as the bar comes down, I need to be thinking about trying to get my shoulders back into a good position, trying to create some torque through the shoulders so I'm set up, and then as the knees come back down, I also end up being able to drive the knees out to that bottom position. So cues are to try to get the shoulders back on the way down, set, and as it comes down, shoulders are back, knees are out, and I arrive through that tunnel in an organized position so that I don't have to reconstitute that tight bottom position or try to take the slack out or generate force from the bottom. So again, from the top, as I come back down, I'm thinking about trying to cultivate some torque, reclaim my shoulder positions, and knees out. This is the mistake, that is, if I get tired, I'm going to have to be living off of my hamstrings as I touch and go. That's going to make it very, very tough, big load on the erectors. The back is the weak link on this thing, shoulders are the weak link on this thing. So if I can preload that shoulder, keep the back straight as I touch and go, boom, then I'm into that second pull earlier with an upright back earlier. Tension farming. On the way down, reclaim torque, knees out, touch and go, and back into that easy position. Now, a couple of the other things that are going to make a big difference. On the first snatch, since it's a power snatch, it's probably not going to make a big difference. Where we're going to start to see a lot of efficiency is if that shoulder ends up forward from me missing internal rotation or not a good setup. You'll notice that all the best athletes, if they're going from the hang, really set up a lot of times setting their shoulders back into that position. What I want to be able to do theoretically is get my shoulders into a nice extended position where the back's in extension so that it's very easy to snap that back. The further my shoulder is in front of that center of line, or back from that stable position, then the longer my turnover is, the more soft the whole system is going to be. So as I'm loading and farming tension, I'm thinking about rotation, but I'm also thinking about trying to reclaim that tight shoulder so I arrive in that bottom position the same way I would be in my perfect setup from the bottom. Back very stiff, loading in this position, and coming up. We've talked about in the past that a top-down load usually ends up with a little bit softer shoulder. And since this is going to be a high rep iteration, we're definitely going to load from the top. So the key idea is I don't want to make sure that my shoulders are soft. I want to make sure that I'm trying to keep as much extension as I can. I would highly, highly advocate using a belt on this thing. We haven't seen in the rules that you can't use a belt. It's going to give you a nice set of extra erectors, especially it gets heavy into that last set of 30 into the set of 210. So, to sum up, a couple big ideas. Keeping the shoulders back so that it's easy to receive. As I reload, I need to not let the shoulder go forward, let myself round so I end up in that soft position. I'm reclaiming torque so the shoulder becomes stable and is wound up, and then shove the knees out in the bottom so I arrive on tension without having to find the tension of the hamstring. I can get my torso upright much earlier. So those are our movement cues. The pieces we're going to go after then are really about prioritizing rotation. So the pieces that are going to get tired, if I haven't mobilized for rotation first, what's going to end up happening is that's the piece that's going to fatigue first, my quality of being able to just end up with a really stable joint where it just doesn't take much to lock that out. So as you're prepping for this, as always, prioritize rotation first as you work over your head. This would be definitely a place where I'd be hanging out. I'd be taking the hand out into a little bit more snatch grip, really working into those corners so that I feel like I can not only just get my arm over my head, but that I can arrive with easily being able to kind of apply this extra rotation torque. Number one. Number two, I would absolutely be camping out on the thoracic spine, making sure that I can get my shoulders into some extension. I'll probably grab a bar or something and load from this side down instead of from the top up. I'll probably anchor off and do some more loading from the top down. Where hit here, full extra rotation bias, and then lower myself down. I'm absolutely going to pay attention to prepping internal rotation. I'll do something where I throw the hand behind the back and work on making sure that I got that shoulder tight and wound up. Take a look at the last few weeks. We've done a 3-cycle about some internal rotation. Grab one of those. Part of your movement prep needs to be lots and lots of arm swings. What we think about the rotator cuff is that it's like hard-packed earth. And exercise is like a fire hose hitting against that hard-packed earth. That water isn't easily absorbed. So I want to be able to really get that shoulder super prepped. Two things I'm thinking about: throwing the hands back, making sure that I just get a quick stretch in the front of the shoulder, 20 or 30 times. And as I wind up, and as I work on kind of getting and freeing up the tissues behind the shoulder blade, I'm also working on some internal rotation where I kick my hand up the back. So I'm really working on some of those pieces in there to make sure that that shoulder is prepped and I've got full internal rotation. As I think about my hips, if I'm missing some hip flexion and I'm not perfect, then what's going to happen is I'm going to end up rounding a little bit, and that's going to cost me some position. So I'm really going to go after some of my pure hip flexion here with some dynamite flossing into these corners so that it's easy to end up with the hip back in the socket. I'll probably also spend a second just resetting that hip and grinding through that capsule into some external rotation here. Just weight bearing and loading that up in that classic hip capsule mode so that it becomes much, much easier to be able to put that knee out on the way down, even in just a couple seconds. If I'm going to do this workout in the afternoon, I'm going to go ahead and try to get some of my joint mobilization in early, try to get a 10-minute dose, and then when I come back to prep and think about this, I'll probably hit it again for another 5 minutes or so. So what will be nice is that the tissues will be open, I'll be using it, I'll have done a little bit of work, then when I go to do my work sets, my actual competition, I'll hit it again for another 5 or 10 minutes. So that the keys to this workout are efficiency, cultivating torque on the way down, thinking about the rotational components, because those are going to save you a lot of energy. This is going to come down to who's got the most efficient snatch at the end. None of these weights are hard till it gets to 210. The more fresh you are working towards those end ranges, the better off you're going to be. What we're going to see is lots of kind of stiff-legged, rounded backs that people are turning over, shoulders in a bad position. By the time they get through 135, they're going to be cooked. And it's that 165 plus where this is going to make men and make women. So, MobilityWOD, good luck on this thing. Post your results in the comments. No. Post your results to the biggest sporting event in the history of the world. See you guys tomorrow.